operating in this world whose meaning has been sort of shredded. And that's how we operate in our lives. And very rightly so, our bodies are reacting in a sort of fight or flight mode because we are disoriented and don't know how to proceed. We've lost sort of meaning and orientation and grounding. And so what you might be feeling, Judy, and what the viewers might be feeling today is complete brain fog. That's a pretty typical symptom of grief. Certainly we think about sadness often as a sign of grief. Forgetfulness, fear, anxiety, anger, which I think a lot of people think about the sadness and the sorrow and that side of the emotional spectrum of grief, but actually anger, irritation, etc., disorientation, those things can also become symptomatic of our grief. And grief also, by the way, can happen in lots of different ways. I don't want to name it as one thing. And we can talk about that if you want a little. Right now, I would just say what we're experiencing as a collective right now is something what Pauline Boss, who's an expert in this, calls ambiguous grief. And it's because unlike a death loss that has a very finite sort of before and after, we are living in a time of things have changed. We don't have what we had. Will we have what we have? Will it go back to normal? Will it be a new normal? What will that look like? And so we're having to live in this state of balancing sort of hope and also acceptance, of this time, and also uncertainty. And back to the thing I talked about before, which is culturally, we just suck at uncertainty. We like binary, and we can, there's just so many things about our cultural context that likes us to have an answer. There's a fix for everything, et cetera, et cetera. So globally, I would say we're experiencing ambiguous loss. And then for many of us, this is compounding or cumulative to other grief that we're on, other grief journeys that we're on. For instance, if you've lost, and those could be old losses or new losses. And each loss, by the way, brings up issues from our old losses. So some people may be facing this broad, ambiguous loss, but also the loss of financial security, or a lot of people 80,000 people in this country have passed away. For every person that dies, at least 3 to 4 people in their lives are immediately affected. So if you think about, and that's just from the COVID losses. So,
so that's so fascinating.
Yeah.
So we lost recording on Facebook for just a second. So I just want to go back and say the analogy that you gave, the metaphor about us, being storytellers of our lives. And then right now, the manuscript that we have has been shredded. I think that that's a really helpful kind of visualization to understand what's going on right now with our collective experience. And there are just so many great terms. Later on, I'd love to dive into a little bit about narrative therapy. But right now, I think the ambiguous grief that you were talking about and the compounding grief, does someone experience compounding grief even if they've healed that grief? Is it just because, like, I remember you and I talking about your experience of losing your husband, and each time a new life experience came up, it reminded you of the loss. So like your daughter getting older and growing up and having different life stages. So can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that manuscript, like Our Lives Are Stories, and the manuscript being shredded applies to all grief. I mean, because that's really kind of what happens in our lives, is that we are sort of at a loss and we're having to rebuild again, regardless of the type of loss. Ambiguous loss and the cumulative effect, let me back up and say each new loss someone experiences, or each new milestone someone experiences along a loss journey, can absolutely bring up some people call them triggers. I call them reminders, because triggers sort of has a negative connotation to it, of more healing and re-scripting of your life. The reason I would hesitate to say it doesn't mean you did the grief work or you healed is I don't actually believe we get through grief and we're done. I think you're always growing, healing, evolving. Certainly your grief, which we call acute grief, sometimes in the first year to 2, is not going to feel or manifest itself in the world the way it is, like I'm about to be at the 9-year anniversary, right, of my husband's loss. So how I live and express and mourn, which is what we do publicly. Grief is what we feel on the inside. Mourning is how we express our grief. So that is different, but it's not like at 9 years, I'm done.
Right.
But on in the meantime is I went from having no story the day my husband died to having rebuilt some sense of a story of my life, and a new loss or a new upending, which we might call this ambiguous loss that's happening for people right now, taps into and pokes holes at the stories of, of the, like, I often think now, like, I wonder what Eric would think about these times. And I'm a single mom, and when something goes wrong, I often think, what would, so I do think each new loss, it's not bad or wrong that each new loss invites us to visit, I would say, and revisit the healing, the growth, and the changing narrative that we're constantly building as we heal and evolve over life. But grief is a journey. Not everybody is happy with this opinion of mine. Grief is a journey, in my opinion, that you're on for a lifetime. It doesn't, again, it's not like you're going to be in this acute grief, but grief ultimately means you loved something so much and you lost it. And so while your love will always last, or your care for that thing will always last, so will your grief. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's about how you integrate into your life.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that culturally, like you were saying before, that we like to have an endpoint to things. We like to have a period. We like to have the binary understanding of what grief is. And unfortunately, that's not usually how life is. So I think that, for me and the different people that I've been connecting with and speaking with, I think that there's this like frustration of what's going to come next, this wanting the pandemic to be over so we can get back to our lives, the understanding that maybe there isn't going to be a normal that we knew before. So there's going to be a new normal that we're going to have to face. And then also having other younger ones, like, my daughter asking, when do I get to go back to school? And like, why is this? So I think that, can you talk about just kind of the list of emotions that you went through about what different people might be experiencing right now that they might not tag as grief or
Yeah. And I really I love that you frame that about kind of this space that I will talk about that, but the space we're all in about, like, will we get back to this new normal? And one of the things that I think, I was just saying this the other day on an interview I did for a TV, is one of the things that I think this pandemic did for us is it sort of shattered the illusion that we have that we always have control and certainty.
Yeah.
Right? So we all and so we all have the sense that, like, we're going back to some new normal. But the thing is, things are always changing all the time. We're always adapting. And that isn't meant as bad news. That's actually encouragement to all of us, which is we are all incredibly adaptive human beings. We are constantly adapting all the time. We are taking in new information and adapting. From something trivial, like in college, you used to stay up till you would go to a party at 12 o'clock at night. That's when you started a party. Now I'm going to be 49 this month. I can't imagine going to a party starting at 12 o'clock.
Yeah.
That's a silly example, but we're always adapting. And so I think the good news, bad news, or one way to tamp down some of the anxiety for us is we've all adapted a lot in our lives, and we're going to adapt through this time too. And there's going to be a lot of good growth that comes from it. That's not to diminish the sad or hard things that people are going through.
Yeah.
The emotions that people might be feeling right now, that and sort of the experiences and the reactions are grief, are considered grief because, again, this is how our body and our body mind state reacts to change, to stress, because we're treating this we're treating this almost like a saber-toothed tiger came out of, like, if you think about sort of our primitive fight or flight system, our nervous systems, usually in a state of loss, trigger a lot of really things that actually help us survive. But right now we're stewing and sitting in them. So for many people, they might be experiencing a lot of brain fog and forgetfulness. There's a real thing called grief fog, which is because we operate in our day-to-day lives sort of pre-pandemic or pre-loss with so much stuff that are on just cognitive loops that we don't have to think about, right? We just know. We get up, the alarm goes up, we get coffee, we know our routine. We don't have to use the sort of active part of our brain to do anything. Well, when you have a loss and your entire world changes, you're now having to use that active part of your brain to just figure out some really basic things. So it's sort of de-resourcing that part of your active brain. And also your nervous system, all of those fight or flight responses are coming up. And so again, when you're running from a saber-toothed tiger, you don't need to use your intellectual, you're using like your primitive brain, right? So you
Mm.
don't need, it's this sort of, I think about the, we know brain development went this way. We're not using this sort of part of our brain. And so we end up feeling really foggy and forgetful for those sort of two reasons. One is our body is sort of in this sort of fight or flight mode. And neurobiologically, our body's like shutting that stuff down up front.
Mm.
But also because we're having to really grapple with and think through what used to be very everyday common things we took for granted about how we knew our routine, and et cetera. And we also rely on some future predictability that keeps our brain from having to think all the time. But what's happening right now is we don't have a certainty about sort of our future, although I would argue we never really did before. But because we don't have that certainty, we are having to constantly negotiate and think about that. So that's sort of the brain fog or the forgetfulness. So if you're finding yourself forgetting to show up on Zoom meeting calls, or forgetting to turn off the stove, or forgetting people's birthdays, sorry, I'm looking for my water, etc., there's a real reason for that. Sadness, for sure, is another very normal response to loss, right? We are all giving up things, contact, finances, lots of things that we love. And then I think that sadness that so many people might be feeling, and then the sleeplessness that people are having, or the oversleeping, by the way, which are two really common responses in grief, because our body either is just trying to shut down and restore, or our minds are perseverating and we can't stop. Irritation and agitation, again, come into play because we are feeling sort of robbed of our sort of normal, from our certainty. And we also start to have a questioning about our own sense of identity. And for those of you who have gone through real major identity shifts in your life, then you end up having more imposter syndrome, more uncertainty in your own sense of like who you are as a person. And so we tend to then interpret other people's comments sometimes, or conversations. If you find yourself being defensive and irritable more often, it's because we are in that place where our sense of groundedness and our identity is up in the air, for good reasons, again, because we've gone through this major shift. I'm going to pause because that's a lot.
No, that's a lot. And I would encourage, anybody who's watching to just kind of ask yourself if you've gone through any of the symptoms that Lisa mentioned, the brain fog, the sadness, the sleeplessness, or the oversleeping, the irritation, and the identity. And I think it happens in a lot of different ways. So all of these are just kind of moments of grief, from everything of like, I went to the beach because they opened up the beaches here in San Diego, but you have to keep moving because the lifeguards and the police are constantly, telling everybody through their loudspeaker, you have to keep walking. So even though there's some sense of normalcy, it's actually not, because you can't sit and you can't, you've got to keep
touch other people.
So there's the constant feeling of that. So I think in so many different ways in our daily lives, we're experiencing this. And what Lisa had said before is that we are a culture that's not been told how to handle grief, and we are not taught like what to do about it. So I think a lot of people know, okay, so I can try meditation and mindfulness practices, which are great. But I think that if you don't have access to being able to express, and you don't have the social support that we usually do in being able to, connect with friends or trusted loved ones to kind of give you that extra boost that you need as very social beings, it can be really, really hard. So if people are going through this right now, what would you recommend is something that we can do to basically change hack our wellness? Because we are limited in certain, aspects. I remember reading recently that there's a reason that a lot of us feel so exhausted, because all of our work has shifted to video conferencing and Zoom and things like that. But there are parts of us that don't understand why we're seeing someone in front of us, but we can't actually physically touch them, and we can't like share that energetic space. And that becomes very hard and very exhausting for our brains to have to navigate. So as you were saying before, like the different parts of our brains that we're accessing right now
are working overload.
Are working overtime. And you don't realize it. Like, I mean, when we were doing band living, I remember realizing how exhausted we were, because every single second of every day we had to figure out where we were going to stay that night, the route that we were going to take, what we were going to eat, how we were going to
that's lack of predictability or certainty, which is what we're going through, means our brains don't ever get to shut off.
Yes, exactly. And that can be exhausting. So it's great that, in this kind of redefining of what who we are as a people, that we're learning that we are very adaptive.
Yes.
And then also just giving ourselves heaps of grace and compassion and kindness.
So much. If we could offer the amount of love and compassion and kindness to ourselves that we would offer to other people, we would be much better as a species.
Yes, exactly. And I love that you want to go into corporations to kind of help them, as, you know, they're both kind of like a problem set, but also a solution set. So what are some of the things that people can do right now to help navigate what it is, this ambiguous grief that we're going through?
Yeah. I want to say sort of one just general practice, and then if I can walk us through a little practice. But one thing I want to say about all these emotions that we talked about today is don't run from them. We live in a culture that is a cult of happiness, that prizes happiness over all others, and any other emotion is bad. And then we start to believe that our emotions, especially the ones we don't like, will swallow us whole and mean we're a bad person. So I use the metaphor often: invite your emotions over for a cup of coffee. I wrote a poem about it. You can check it out, Reimagining Grief. I actually did a little video recording. And it's really that idea that if you don't invite them in for a cup of coffee, listen to what they have to say, and understand them, and let them on their way, they're just going to be sitting on your doorstep, looming out the window. And every time you try to go out the door or open your window, they're going to be there. No emotions stay. Not our happy ones or our hard ones. And so one of the things I would invite people to do right now is, instead of when emotions come up, whatever they are, especially the ones we don't like to have, like anger is one, everybody has their emotions that they're good at and bad at, I would say. So especially when the ones come up that you don't like or you're bad at, invite it in, have some compassion, ask it what it needs to tell you. It will go, but the more you sort of keep it at bay, the more it looms large, and you haven't actually made any forward progress. So that's sort of just as a general adaptive rule, I would say, the more we can get better at inviting all of our emotions in for a cup of coffee, the better we're going to be. And they promise they will not unpack their bags and stay. Because if they could, we would like unpack the joy and invite it to stay. They don't, but that will teach us a lesson. So the sort of the change hack that I really want to encourage us all to think about, and I'd love to sort of lead us through a little bit of a meditation, if that's okay, is so much of what we're all feeling right now, always in loss, but I think particularly as we face this uncharted territory of this global pandemic and the sort of fear that is permeating our everyday lives, when we have to wear masks to go outside, or we can't touch people, or we have to wipe down our groceries, or, you know, whatever the sort of absurdity is that we're having. Right now, we're operating in fear, and we're sitting in fear, which is not good for our nervous system at all, right? Fear is supposed to be a temporary fight or flight, and what's happening is we're like sitting in it. And that's causing to how you open today's conversation, which is that's how our mental state is impacting our physical state. Increased heart rate and pressure, decreased oxygen levels, lots of things are happening. Fear is a useful neurobiological function, keeps us from being mauled by the saber-toothed tiger, but we can't sit in it. The invitation I have today is there's another, I would say, equally important neurobiological imperative that we have, and that's love. Our species and survival is also predicated on love and connection and attachment, as equally as the sort of power of our neurobiologically wired fear. You know, they are both survival instincts, but we give so much attention to fear because it grabs your attention. It's loud. It's the loud, flashy friend in your life who like gets in your face, right? But love is one, and I mean love in the most expansive. I'm not talking necessarily about romantic love. I'm talking about the kind of love that we can give and offer to others and to ourselves. So I want to invite us, if we can, maybe to kind of close-ish out, to do a meditation, which I practice this meditation daily. I use the mantra that you'll hear throughout in my 20 to 30 minute silent meditation. If you're not a meditator, that's okay. And this is available on my website, so folks can grab it too, or we can share it with your group.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So I want to invite everybody. I'm going to model it too. It's a little weird. We're on Facebook Live, but I'm going to close my eyes. So I'm trusting you guys to close your eyes too. And we're going to do this. And as you guys know, when we get into a meditative state, I'm going to open my eyes because I have to do a little reading, but I want you to get comfortable in whatever seat you're in, or couch if you're on the floor. And just begin to notice the way your body feels against the back of the chair, the weight of your legs on the seat. Notice the way your feet feel on the floor. And I want to invite you to just notice your breath. You don't need to do anything with it. But as you start to center into your body, I want you to notice what thoughts are coming. Don't judge them, be aware of them. Today's meditation is a reminder that what we focus on becomes our reality. It's an invitation to bring love to the center of our awareness, to draw and sustain our attention to the sensations of love. Today's meditation is an invitation to commit to seeing love, feeling love, radiating love, and receiving love. As you continue to notice your breath, the presence of your body in your chair, I want to invite you to repeat in your mind each statement, breathing in and out the sensation of the words. When joy brightens my day, may I see love, feel love, radiate love, receive love. When delight dazzles my senses, may I see love, feel love, radiate love, receive love. When hope swells my heart, may I see love, feel love, radiate love, receive love. When amazement makes me breathless, may I see love, feel love, radiate love, receive love. When despair clouds my vision, may I see love, feel love, radiate love, receive love. When fear immobilizes my body, may I see love, may I feel love, may I radiate love, may I receive love. When loneliness seeps into my joints, may I see love, feel love, radiate love, receive love. When anger constricts my heart, may I see love, feel love, radiate love, receive love. May I see love. May I feel love. May I radiate love. May I receive love. Inviting you to, before you open your eyes, just feel the sensation of love. Feel it healing and empowering your body, your mind, and your spirit. And as you open your eyes, think about the ways that you can see love, feel love, radiate love, and receive love in each and every day.
I love that. I love meditations around loving kindness. It's so
Yeah.
wonderful. And I was actually just reading about vagal toning and how your vagus nerve is connected to the parasympathetic. So it's the
Yes.
rest and digest. It also helps to enhance, like, immunity in so many ways. It decreases inflammation. It does all these things. So loving kindness and being able to feel that social connection, even if you can't
Yeah.
be in that
Yeah.
space, is a really wonderful way to tone your vagal nerve, and humming and things
Absolutely.
like that. So I love that meditation. Thank you so much for sharing that.
It has been really transformational for me, because it's, even as a person who practices this work and does this work, it's very easy, especially as we consume news more and more or spend more time away from people, to feel disconnected from that. But there is actually so much love in and around us.
Mm.
And we practice fear daily,
Mm.
but we don't practice love daily. And this is an invitation to practice love
Mm.
daily.
I love that. I think love and understanding how to, you know, integrate grief and how to process and heal it. I love the idea that, your emotions will always change. Nothing's permanent. Nothing's going to be forever. So if you
Yeah.
allow it in and you practice that acceptance, it can help you
Yeah.
heal.
Yeah.
We had a question come up that,
And I'm listening. I'm going to plug in my computer, y'all, technology,
Oh,
but
yeah.
you know how that goes.
Oh, yeah. How do we grieve the version of ourselves we hoped we would be during this period of COVID? I think there were so many things in the beginning of use this time productively, go take a class, go do all this
Okay.
stuff.
Stop.
And it was like, oh.
Stop. Do it. Do it. I mean, I'm trying to learn Spanish. I'm not doing very good. I mean, do it if you want to. I think, first of all, beautiful question. And to just name that, I think, is the first step. That's hugely important. Is we have a sense, and we're always, because we're story builders and dreamers. I was just talking about this with somebody today. We're always, this is called a non-finite loss. Some people call it, which is because we're always dreaming of something and hoping towards something, but it's not necessarily, it is or isn't going to happen. Like, I didn't make it to the major leagues or not, but like, we're dreaming of kids someday, or we're dreaming of being a successful something. And it's not quite, the door isn't closed, but we're always negotiating, and it's things that we don't have control over, which for this person, this version of themselves that they were going to become, we don't have control over, because the world has sort of shut down. So I'd say even asking the question to me means that person is on the right track to finding some healing for themselves. Is to just name this, like, I'm having the sense that I am not going to have a chance, at least in this time, and I don't know the specifics of their life, but in this time, to become what I want to become. And then to offer some loving kindness to that, like to honor that is a loss. I think we're so busy to be, and I am a half glass full person, but I think we're, in a weird way, overly busy to be, we're overly culturally attuned to be like, pull yourself up, buck up, move on, la, la, la. Again, because we're just crappy at dealing with hard emotions. I don't think and because we're a capitalist society and we want to produce. But I think my invitation to that person, and to all of us who are grieving some version of ourselves that we're shifting and seeing maybe isn't going to become, is to say, I think of it almost like as an externalizing conversation, to like look at that version of yourself and have a like, I'm sorry. Like, I'm sorry that, and kind of hold it and care for it in this way, and to acknowledge, like, I'm sorry that you aren't where you want to be right now, this version of yourself. There is a point at which we have to move on and figure out what is the version of ourselves we're going to be. But I think we're really all good at trying to like fast forward to like buck up, and I'll speak for myself, but many people I know, are like kind of like buck up and move on. And so to that person, I would say, take some time to sort of talk to that version of yourself, and to sort of feel whatever emotions again come up around that, and to sort of give credence and space and validity to whatever emotions are around losing that version of yourself. And I think only in doing that are you able to then connect with, who am I in this moment? What version of myself do I like about myself in this moment? How can I heal and move forward? What opportunities can I see for myself that I might not have seen before? And again, it's not about becoming the best version of yourself and, like 10 ways to be more productive in your life, but really honor that loss. That's a loss. And
I mean, there was a meme that was going around as it's a pandemic, not a productivity contest. And I think that there is something that feels good about being productive. It feels like you're in control. And I think that if that's something that we need right now, okay, like, you know, we honor that. But then also if it's creating additional stress and worry and anxiety, then that's not quite the space to be in. And Cheryl Strayed in her book, is it Tiny Beautiful Things? Is that what it's
yes,
called? But she quotes this poet, and I'll find the poem, but it's about how all of us have sister lives. And had we gone down this path instead of that one, it would have led to a whole other life. And, you know, in the realm of like quantum physics, there's an understanding that there's infinite possibilities that are all simultaneously existing. So there's kind of solace in that, but there is the grief of like, I will not know what my life would look like had I gone down that path, because I didn't walk down that path. I'm going down this one. And so I think that having that is a wonderful way of, again, approaching ourselves with so much more compassion. We're also, I don't think, a society good at self-compassion. We're really great about talking about it with other people, but just not for ourselves.
We're not good at self-compassion because we are so inundated with all these cultural messages that actually counter all that, which is your value is linked to your productivity, to your job, to pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, to being happy, and to all these things. And so when we are having emotions or we're in a state where we need to grieve or slow down or rest our bodies, even if we kind of intellectually know that's what I need to do, there's so much inundation in our lives that actually, even if people say to you, you should slow down, we're still feeling the messages sort of undercurrent that like, well, that means you're not valuable. And so my invitation to you is screw all those messages and really find space to care for yourself in that way, whether it's meditation or other practices.
That's beautiful. If anybody else has any other questions about grief, please reach out to Lisa directly. As she mentioned before, she does one-on-one sessions. You know, I think that this is so valuable because I know that so many people are feeling a lot of feelings, and I think anybody who's on a mission to change the cultural conversation around something that we have long held as like a truth or a belief, I love. So thank you so much for showing up. My business partner, Charlotte, and I are all about change hacking wellness and just taking those for a long time tried and true, like, you know, things, and then really looking at it with a modern lens and seeing, is there a better way that we could go about this? And are there things that we need to stop sweeping under the rug? Are there things that we need to just really have honest and authentic conversations about? So thank you so much for the work that you're doing in the world. Is there anything else that you want to add before we close today?
I don't think so. I mean, I could talk about this for days and days, but I think invite your emotions over for a cup of coffee. Invite them in. That's my invitation to all of us.
That's awesome. I love that. Let's continue to practice acceptance. So have a beautiful rest of your day, everyone who's watching this live or on the replay. Thank you for all of the being patient with all the technical glitches. So I will post Lisa's information if anybody wants to connect with her directly. And thank you again, Lisa.
Yeah, thank you. This was fantastic.
Yay. Okay. So I am going to stop the recording now.